Speakers announced policy of January 3rd, 2025. The gentleman from California, Mr. LaMalfa, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity here as we conclude the week. I wanted to take the time today to highlight some of the work that we're doing in the Western Caucus, made up of over 90 members of the U.S. House of Representatives, and I've been privileged to become the chair of that group this year. And so, chairing the committee, the caucus, I get to bring up a lot of key issues on the floor and kind of illustrate to the people that are watching, that wish to pay attention, that how important the issues that we are taking up and continue to advance. Working with the Trump administration, one of the cornerstones indeed is in energy, and we call ourselves the Western Caucus, but the issues are a little beyond the Western states. Indeed, they're rural issues. They're issues that affect all of our states, and the opportunity to strengthen our entire economy with what we have available in the Western states, in rural areas. Indeed, our oil and our energy come from many, many parts of the country. The original oil patch was in actually Western Pennsylvania, but so we're less about maybe what the real estate is, but more about the concepts of advancing rural issues and the ability to extract resources, to utilize resources ecologically soundly. That's we're all about that too. So we get the U.S. gets a bad reputation sometimes of people that are in these industries are misconstrued by environmental groups and such as being against the environment and against doing things properly. So really, the bottom line on that topic is that unleashing American energy and our mineral resources, strengthening agriculture, and tackling the real challenges facing our country, like the devastating wildfires in the West, are key issues that the Western Caucus faces. One of the things that can help with some of these issues would be modernizing the Endangered Species Act. It's been around over 50 years, and I see the futility as it's interpreted these days, and layer after layer of court decisions and lawsuits that basically just hamper the ability for us to do the things we need to do to have stronger energy availability, have the other resources that are key towards a strong economy for our country, and not import all these products. Indeed, with the goals set out, at least by some, to have further electricity usage for appliances, which we've talked about this week on this floor, there's requirements. There's people being mandated to change what their appliances are powered by. And so when you have a gas-powered stove, gas water heater, and on, that mandates, whether it's my home state of California or has come through the previous Biden administration, this has taken away consumer choices, taken away the best choice for a lot of people for how to power these devices. And that extends also to automobiles, trucks, which if you got it, a truck brought it. And that's an important aspect to remember as well, is that just by merely sweeping away the ability to have gasoline and diesel, as California's doing and that they're trying to do, and that the federal government had been until the end of the Biden administration, that's going to cost a lot. It's going to make it a lot less convenient, a lot more difficult to get raw materials and products from where they're created to where they're needed. So Endangered Species Act is part of the issue that needs to be modernized, as well as getting over the lawsuits and litigation that is used as a weapon, whether it's by federal agencies or by so-called NGOs, environmental groups. So we've been working in this chamber, as I mentioned this week, to help deliver solutions to lower energy costs, cut red tape, in reversing the Biden administration's relentless overreach, from blocking costly energy efficiency mandates on consumer products, stopping unnecessary restrictions on American manufacturing and energy production. We want these things to be manufactured here. by American workers using American technology, American efficiency, and the cleanliness that comes with it. We're much more efficient, much cleaner than what happens in China manufacturing. Our natural gas we use in this country is actually cleaner than Russian natural gas. We should be exporting more of that to Europe and helping them out instead of them becoming dependent on the long reputation we've had with Russia there. So when we're talking about these overreaches by governments, by these regulations, it really drives up prices, burdens businesses, and makes us more dependent on foreign products, foreign energy, etc. So let's restore American energy dominance, support these industries that put food on the table and clothing on our back and shelter above us. Support them to make our country stronger and more independent. We'll push back against the policies that are failing and harming rural America. So I look forward to hearing from my colleagues. Some of them will be joining me during this time here, and what they're working on as part of our Western Caucus partnership here. So I've seen that a couple of my colleagues have arrived here, so if I would like to recognize, if she's ready, my Executive Vice Chair, Celeste Malloy from Utah, is with us here, and I'm pleased to have her as a partner and friend on the Western Caucus to inform us on the issues that are particular to Utah, but also the Western states as well. So I'm really pleased that she's stepped up to be in this role here, and appreciate her quite a bit. So Celeste, please take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here today, and I commend my colleagues in the Western Caucus for their unwavering dedication to preserving the values and livelihoods of rural America, the Western states, and our Western values that we both represent. Today I want to highlight 3 pieces of legislation that I've introduced. One of them addresses abuses of the Antiquities Act. One of them addresses the inefficiencies and unfairness of our permitting system. And the other one addresses the need to get geothermal energy up and going more quickly and more efficiently. I'll start with the Antiquities Act. So for decades, the executive branch, presidents of the United States, mostly Democrats, have used the Antiquities Act of 1906 to designate vast areas as national monuments. And that's an authority that we delegated to them in the 1906 Antiquities Act. The abuse of that narrow delegated authority has resulted in restricted access to lands, hindered economic opportunities, and it's left local voices unheard and frustrated. In my district, the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument was created by Bill Clinton in 1996 over the objections of Utah's governor, Utah's federal delegation, local and county and state elected officials, and those frustrations and scars and wounds have not healed in the years that have passed since then. So my Ending Presidential Overreach on Public Lands Act ensures that the decisions of this magnitude affecting public lands are made collaboratively, respecting the role of Congress with our jurisdiction over public land, and taking input from local voices. It should be Congress that makes those widespread, large-scale land management decisions. The next one I want to talk about is the FREE Act, which encourages agencies to go look at the permits they issue and determine which ones can be done by permit by rule, which means they have a predetermined list of requirements for a permit and firm timelines on making those decisions. So an applicant can bring an agency everything on that list, and the agency can either say, yes, this is adequate for a permit and issue the permit, or say, no, it's not adequate for a permit, and give the applicant what they need to do to remedy that so that we can permit especially infrastructure projects more quickly. Right now it takes years and millions of dollars to permit infrastructure projects, especially in states like Utah, where most of the land is managed by the federal government, and everything we do has to go through multiple layers of federal processes. And lastly, the GEO Act addresses the time that it takes to permit geothermal energy projects. Geothermal energy is abundant in Utah. We are leading out in a lot of ways on developing new geothermal resources, but the time it takes to get the permit to build a geothermal plant is prohibiting us developing some of the resources and getting clean, reliable baseload power online that this country needs now and will need even more in the future. These bills, all three of them, they're not all of my bills, but I wanted to highlight those three today because they're about safeguarding public lands, fostering economic growth, and empowering our communities. They're about letting ranchers, families, small businesses, and entrepreneurs benefit from thoughtful and responsive government as opposed to government that drowns out their voices and ignores their needs. I urge my colleagues to support these measures, which offer pragmatic solutions to real challenges in Utah, throughout the West, and throughout the whole country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Malloy. I appreciate that. I wanted to ask you a little bit, if you care to, on the Antiquities Act, because I've shared a lot of that frustration as well. The Biden administration, on the way out the door, declared several monument areas, a couple in California, one on the ocean area, and it really seems that it's become down to just being an executive action and with very little input by Congress, and I know that's what you're working on in your legislation. But a couple examples I can think of is that in one of the recent ones is over 600 million acres is turned of an ocean monument area. And so when you do the math on that, that ends up being about 1,000 square miles of, a million square miles of a 1,000 mile square. That's a giant chunk of ocean that is no longer really usable for normal things with fishing and things like that. And then in my home state, up in my district, they declared almost a 250,000 acre area that they really had little consultation with the folks there that had like a mining operation, and the timber management needed to happen. So it has been quite abusive. What do you think over time here the long-term effects have been on energy in the West and energy exploration and the types of things we need to be doing?
Well, it's had a negative impact on energy production by, excuse me, I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
As soon as I get in front of a microphone, then I have a tickle in my throat. By restricting the areas that are open for use, withdrawing them from mineral exploration, oil and gas exploration, and energy production. The original intent of the Presidential Proclamation Authority in the Antiquities Act was for the President to be able to move quickly and declare a national monument in an area with antiquities or an area of scientific interest to hold it until Congress could make a decision. Since 1976, when the Federal Land Policy and Management Act, FLPMA, passed, it's been the policy of the federal government that we don't dispose of land anymore. So that threat has been removed. The need for a president to move quickly no longer exists, and the act is just being used to create land policy that couldn't get through Congress. And that's the process matters when it comes to land management, and we need to take back that authority we gave presidents because they're not using it in the way Congress intended it to be used. Now it's being abused, and we need to end that abuse by exercising our legislative powers.
I agree. It seems that it's really flipped into just one direction on the invoking of a new monument or wilderness area or what have you. And I know your state of Utah has been hit pretty hard by several. Now, it's not that we're against these measures to protect particular areas, but what we talk about is gigantic swaths of land instead of something a little more focused, which the original intent was focus on the particular historic or geographic areas, maybe like an old growth forest area or something like that, areas where there might be Native American ruins that we want to particularly focus, but instead we get these gigantic acreages, and I know the Trump administration is going to be looking at some of these here, as they did previously. And also I like what you were speaking about on your geothermal process there, because it should be an all of the above way of looking at things on types of energy we have available. And geothermal is clean power, and it's one that's available 24/7. You don't have to wait for the wind to blow or the sun to come up or the clouds to go away. And so we need a lot more base load power, because look at what's going on with the tech centers and the amount of AI it's going to be coming on board, and the amount of energy that's going to be consuming. These data centers are going to use a mass amount of new electricity if they're allowed to. And they've talked about wanting to do it all as renewable. If geothermal can be a source in those areas, that's one thing. But we're going to have to get real on where our power is going to come from, because we have to have reliable baseload power. So geothermal's had a very, very difficult permitting process. Any idea what kind of timeline? How many years does it take to get one through, if you can get them through?
I don't know what the current timeline is, but I know it's taking years when it should take months. We know what a geothermal power plant looks like. We know how to do it in a way that's environmentally sensitive. We're just taking time and money to get to that end point that we already know we're headed to.
Yeah, indeed. When, as another example, there was a copper mine. It's not the same as a geothermal power plant, but one particular one in the West took 29 years to permit. So when you're talking any kind of thing that's moving forward on self-sufficiency on minerals or energy dominance that the U.S. needs to have, it takes a decade or more in many cases to get this done. A desalination plant in Southern California along the coast, I think out of Huntington Beach, Poseidon Project it was called. They fought for 2 decades to try and get a desalination. We can't build water storage in California, it seems, or other areas. So everybody says, well, hey, desal, we can use the Pacific Ocean. Not until you try to permit and do it. They fought for 20 years to work through a permit process and jump through every hoop. What requirement will make them happy to take care of the brine, the landscape itself. And after all that time, they were still denied by the California Coastal Commission and others to be able to do that. So permitting does need to be reformed, not thrown away, because we want to have a process where people can have a say and a look at what's happening. But by the same token, when we talk about the Antiquities Act, people need to have a say as well, not just 2,500 miles away in Washington, D.C., where a stroke of the pen does it. As Ms. Malloy mentioned here, local input from their legislature, their governor, and their delegation to D.C. basically was ignored on national monuments that were done in Utah. And we didn't get heard a whole lot up in Northern California on the one done recently as well either. It was kind of one-sided. So I appreciate you bringing those to the forefront here today. And
thank you.
You're welcome to make any more comment as you wish, but we'll move on a little bit to Western water for right now too. So it's a key issue for agriculture, for hydroelectric, and thank you, and with safety from flood, and even recreation, as well as a lot of the folks that are on wanting more water for fish needs and fish passage and such. They sure enjoy the benefits of having stored water in western dams or any dams. I point out as an example here, this is Shasta Dam in Northern California. It's a Central Valley project, as it's known. It's a federal project built in the 30s and came online strongly in the early 40s. This is an amazing project, and it's the cornerstone of California water, as well as some of the Colorado River water sources we have. But this is 4.5 million acre feet in one dam and one lake up in Shasta County, California. And so the way it's operated is extremely important. And when we don't have as good of decisions being made, at least in my opinion, on how that water is stored, how it's kept, how it's allocated, then people suffer on that unnecessarily. So right now, this lake sits at about, say 600,000 acre feet still to fill it up. And the thing that gets me is that we're seeing farmers and others in the water districts in Central California, San Joaquin Valley, where so much of our important food supply for the whole country comes from. They're stuck at 35 or 40% of their what used to be the normal allocation. And part of that is that they can't point to there's the water supply. Now, I think it's a bit of a misnomer. There's plenty of water around. I'll illustrate that here in a moment. But this lake, when it's 4.5 million acre feet full, along with our other lakes, Why isn't that allocation to agriculture and others closer to 100%? It hasn't reached 100% in a long time. And a lot of that is based on what we talked about a moment here ago, Endangered Species Act, and its weaponization in the last 50+ years. It's not a matter of us not caring about species and trying to recover them and conserve them. It's that it's used as a weapon to stop further water storage or the other issues we talk about, other energy projects, even forestry practices that we would be helpful to not have continued wildfire at the massive scale we're seeing so much, especially in the western states. So what I want to see happening for Lake Shasta, for example, is that they can use more scientific forecasting of what the systems of weather are going to be looking like in a given year, in a given season. We're about to end the rainy season as a Bureau of Reclamation and Army Corps of Engineers. The Army Corps is in charge of flood control, so they control the top portion of this dam and like Lake Oroville down near where I live, and many, many others around the whole country. That's their charge, is for flood control. So they'll require that a certain gap from the top of the dam down, 40, 50 feet or so, a particular amount of storage has to be available until the end of the rainy season, which is pretty much April 1. So at that point, you're allowed to fill the lake. The lake can fill on up. Well, we're 600,000 acre-feet down, and they're assessing the snowpack more or less as I speak, but with still another weather pattern coming in here quite soon that would probably enhance that snowpack number as well. So what gets me is that we've allowed, Bureau of Reclamation and Army Corps has allowed about 2 million acre-feet to leave this lake, to leave this system since early January. And that's flowed down, in this case, the Sacramento River and on out to the Delta. So you want to see something about Delta numbers. This poster here isn't quite updated, but it illustrates how the water flows down from the north and such and flows through the Bay Delta out to the ocean. These numbers are a little bit older. I have to update my poster here, but it shows a gap on this case here at this timeline. 29 million acre-feet flowed into the Delta. Down below it shows 22 million acre-feet flowed out. I mean, that is a heck of a lot of water to lose that we didn't capture more of. We have an excellent opportunity to do better at that and keep more water for hydroelectric power, for agriculture, recreation, people's use in the urban areas. There's a bit of a misnomer that people in agriculture use way more water than what is actually the case. Of stored water in the state, 50% goes for environmental purpose, 40% and descending goes for agriculture, and about 10% for urban and people use. So, and that's of captured water, and there's about another 50% of the total rainfall and snowpack that falls on the state that flows out to the ocean or other areas that ends up being basically, you could call it environmental water as well, because people don't get to use it, and it's doing what it does in the rivers and streams and such. So you keep hearing like, well, these farmers are wasting water and people in the cities have to conserve more, and conservation is good. Farmers using better practices is good as well. But if you're telling people in the urban areas, and wait till this really happens to them, and this will really get their attention, when they get rationed down to 42 gallons per day per person, and you see these kinds of numbers, you see that much water going out to the Delta because we have people refusing to build the storage and run the pumps, for example, at the south end of the Delta that could be filling up what's known as San Luis Reservoir, which hasn't been topped off yet. It was topped off 2 years ago, but last year and this year, under similar snowpack and rain circumstances, they haven't allowed the pumps to run hard enough to fill it. I'm hoping, and here it is, a lot of stuff seems to be based on hope that we can have enough melt into the Shasta Lake or Lake Oroville and the other large ones that they will fill up and there'll be enough water for everybody. But how do you count on having that amount of water that amount of rainfall in March and April. I mean, I've lived there my whole life. You don't always get heavy rains in March and April, and that would help top off these reservoirs. So, so it is indeed important to California, but it's an important Western issue, and what gets produced in those areas is important to everybody. So I recognize that it's not just a California, but an entire Western issue, and that's why the Western Caucus is going to be focusing partly on that. So another colleague of mine, Mr. Nick Begich of Alaska, has joined me here, and I'd like to recognize him for as much time as he may consume on bringing a perspective of what's going on in that great northern area of Alaska and the amazing amounts of resources they have there that this country enjoys and consumes, and it does so responsibly as well. So thank you for joining us, Mr. Begich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to discuss the many opportunities of Alaska as America's most western state and most eastern state and most northern state. Alaska is nearly 20% of United States landmass. We have more than half of the United States coastline, and it is estimated that we have more undiscovered estimated natural gas and oil resources than any other state in the country. We have nearly every critical mineral on the critical minerals list in Alaska. We have base metals, we have precious metals, of course, we have rare earths in abundance. We've got incredible timber resources and produce about 60% of America's seafood. Alaska is a crucial state, and I'm proud to be a member of our House's Western Caucus. You know, I'm the only member from the state of Alaska. We have about 730,000 people that live in a state that's 2.5 times the size of Texas. And we are vast, we are independent, and we want to make sure that we have the ability to develop the resources that we've been blessed with. Under President Trump's leadership, we have seen executive orders that specifically allow for development of our critical minerals, of those rare earths that I spoke of our natural resources, including tremendous energy resources in ANWR and in PRA and elsewhere. And that is what Alaskans want. Alaskans want the ability to be independent, to develop their resources responsibly, and to stand on their own 2 feet. And I'm thrilled to be a part of this body, a body that is focused on making sure that Alaska's energy resource potential is fully unlocked, that our mineral potential is fully unlocked, that we restore domestic supply chains again. And as we restore those supply chains, we know that those supply chains begin with resources and begin with energy to process those resources. Alaska is the cornerstone of this strategy, and we are excited to be a part of that conversation. And I look forward to the opportunities that we'll be bringing forward in the 119th Congress to advance Alaska's interests, our nation's interests, and restore domestic manufacturing in this nation again. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Indeed, with all the rich resources we have in Alaska, it would be amazing if we can get the permitting process so they can produce these rare earths and critical minerals in our country instead of relying on them from adversaries that are not going to be reliable long term. So I appreciate you bringing that to our attention and the work you're battling to do up there. So thank you, Mr. Begich. Let me now recognize from Montana, one of our new members here as well, who has half of Montana. You don't get to have the whole state anymore, I think, with 2 members there. Mr. Troy Downing, thank you for joining us here. And indeed, these large states are home of so much rich resources that are important to our country, and we're glad to have Western Caucus membership that is recognizing that and working with us here. So, Mr. Downing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for yielding me some time. You know, Montana has many mottos, official and unofficial. The last best place. It's the big sky country. It's the treasure state. And this last one recognizes the rich natural resources we have in the great state of Montana right underneath our feet. Up until recently, Biden's anti-American policies have allowed foreign actors to dominate mineral markets, and this has stifled domestic energy production to the detriment of western states like Montana. I had the opportunity to return home last week, and I heard about these issues firsthand from miners across the 2nd District. In fact, I probably spent more time below ground than I did above it, and actually I really enjoyed that. I'm going to talk first about Stillwater County. In Stillwater County, the miners of the Sibanye-Stillwater mine are hard at work producing the only platinum and palladium that's mined in America. Years of feckless trade policy on the part of the Biden administration has allowed malign foreign actors like Russia to flood commodities markets, crippling smaller producers like Sibanye-Stillwater. You know, Russia, which represents more than a third of the market, has been subsidizing and dumping these critical minerals, causing artificially low commodity prices. You know, this resulted in the layoff of approximately 700 workers, hardworking miners, just last year. It's had a negative impact from dumping that's not only, you know, affected the commodity price, but it's made it so that the commodity price is below the actual cost to extract it. You know, the ripple effects are still being felt throughout my district. This is why our Montana's congressional delegation is stepping up. I stand shoulder to shoulder with Congressman Zinke, with Senators Daines and Sheehy, and we introduced the Stop Russian Market Manipulation Act. This bans imports of critical minerals from Russia. We're creating a competitive market for U.S. mineral producers, not driven down by dumping from foreign actors and extending a vital lifeline to operations like Stillwater. This not only allows these mines to support their workforces, but this also drives the local economy, it drives my state economy, and it's also a factor in the security of these United States of America. You know, our bill encourages domestic production, decreases reliance on foreign minerals, shores up supply chains, and significantly bolsters national security, all while dealing a critical blow to Putin's war machine. You know, these factors combine to make a real difference in the lives of hardworking Montanans who rely on these jobs to make ends meet. Now go on to another one of ours. Signal Peak Mine. This is the only, this is in Muscle Shoals County, and Signal Peak Mine has faced a similar reality after years of regulatory foot dragging and America Last energy policy. This threatened Montana's only underground coal mining operation. You know, I spoke with miners who expressed concern about Signal Peak's future amidst permitting uncertainty and resource availability. My Crow Revenue Act eliminates this uncertainty by facilitating a critical land transfer that unlocks access to mineable federal coal while providing the Crow tribe with a piece of the revenue. With bicameral support, I'm confident we'll get this bill across the finish line for our tribal communities and our state economy. More importantly, this is another step in ensuring American energy dominance. You know, in closing, let me make one thing abundantly clear. You know, there's a new sheriff in town. None of these efforts would stand a chance of becoming law without this administration. You know, President Trump has taken swift executive action to declare a national energy emergency, reopened exploration on federal lands and waters, appointed an all-star cabinet with the likes of Secretary Wright and Secretary Burgum to streamline permitting and unleash American energy. You know, this is why I am hopeful for projects like Black Butte Copper near White Sulphur Springs, who are committed to unlocking the Treasure State's resources and driving rural economic development, all in a responsible manner. And I can't wait to see what this next 4 years bring for my state and others like it. You know, let us not squander this opportunity and work together to make American mining great again. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield my time.
Thank you, Mr. Downing. I appreciate your perspective on that. And we're finding that these western states, the Western Caucus focus area, I guess, is very rich in so much of what we need here. And so I appreciate your work with those folks in the mines to illustrate how important they are to the whole country and our energy grid, et cetera. So thanks so much for your time with us, and the technical issues with the podium there, but they emphasize the point. But
yeah, thanks.
But thanks so much, and
Thank you, sir.
I'm pleased to have excited new freshman members that really want to take charge and get going here. So it's good stuff. So with that, we'll move on to another colleague, a new member from North Dakota, who's shown a lot of enthusiasm to jump in with us here in Western Caucus and help make it happen. Another at-large district, which means the entire state. So even though there's maybe not a lot of people in these areas, it's extremely important what they do. So Julie Fedorchik from North Dakota, please take it away.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This little podium seems to have a mind of its own, so I'm going to leave it down so it doesn't scare us all again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleagues in the Western Caucus for leading the charge to strengthen rural America's future. As a fourth-generation North Dakotan, I've seen how the hard work of our energy and agriculture producers fuels our economy, strengthens our communities, and secures our very way of life. That's why on Monday, I introduced a resolution to overturn the Biden administration's reinstatement of the once-in, always-in rule. This is a short-sighted, bureaucratic mandate that punishes energy producers, manufacturers, and small businesses for investing in emissions reduction. This rule permanently classifies certain industrial facilities as major sources of hazardous air pollutants, even if they take meaningful steps to reduce emissions below the federal thresholds. That makes no sense. Facilities that make major investments to reduce emissions should be rewarded, not locked into outdated, costly regulations that discourage further investments. By refusing to let businesses reclassify after making progress, this rule removes any real incentive to invest in cleaner technologies. Instead of supporting innovation, it sends a clear message: don't even bother. Democrats like to use the mantra of hope and change. This regulatory approach says there's no hope, so don't change. That's not environmental stewardship. That's Washington overreach. The United States has reduced emissions more than any other nation since 2005, all the while leading the world in energy production. We should be building on that success, not undermining it, with policies like this outdated, overly burdensome Biden regulation that stifle investment and progress. North Dakota is proof that responsible energy production and environmental stewardship, they go hand in hand. It's not one or the other. Our state has never violated federal air quality standards. I want to say that again. Our state has never violated federal air quality standards while being one of the largest energy producers in the whole country. This is a testament to the more than $2 billion our energy producers have invested in emissions control technologies. And they did that because they take their responsibility seriously. They want to be good stewards of our resources and of our air and our water. American businesses are dedicated to protecting the health, safety, and vibrancy of their communities. What they need is regulatory certainty, not a rule that locks them into compliance with outdated standards even after they've done the right thing. This is about more than just one burdensome regulation. It's about standing up for the industries that power our economy and rejecting Washington's one-size-fits-all approach. American energy solutions are climate solutions. American energy producers are providing the solutions that are going to solve energy needs and environmental needs for the world over. Let's encourage investment in technology, not support regulations that make it impossible to do business. I'm proud to lead this effort in the House, and I urge my colleagues to support this resolution. Let's restore regulatory certainty, the number one cry from the industry that I meet with. We need regulatory certainty. And let's send a clear message that we stand with American energy producers, farmers, manufacturers, and we stand with innovation. Mr. Speaker, our nation has been blessed abundantly with natural resources. Misguided regulations and policies are strangling the very people in our nation who are building and producing everything that we need. They're strangling the people who create jobs, who produce the products, the food, who pay taxes, who employ people, the people who make our communities strong. We need to stop doing that. We need to correct course in our approach for government and regulation. Our Republican House caucus, the President, the Senate, Republicans, we are committed to doing this for America and to making our nation, our states, our energy producers, our farmers, manufacturers, and our communities to make all of those great again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Fedorchik. Great points you emphasized for us, and it's a common theme here. Thank you for that. And in that, the red tape, the endless delays in doing the work that needs to be done to produce, and that's what the Western states, the Western Caucus, but indeed our whole country. I got to remember that and to emphasize, these products come from all over. When we're talking mined materials, farmed materials, wood, it's all important, and the same laws that affect us in Western states affect us everywhere. And why are we having to spend so many years to get permits to do things that we know how to do well, and indeed in the United States do with a better set of environmental regulations that are way more conscious of that than what you're ever going to get produced in China or some of the other Pacific Rim areas. We have the technology to do it the best, as Ms. Fedorchik was talking about. If you want to talk about CO2, which I don't a whole lot because I think CO2 is an essential building block. It is not a pollutant, as has been whipped for so many years amongst regulatory agencies and NGOs and such. But if you want to look at how the United States has been doing, we're one of only a couple countries that has been able to level off and even reduce CO2 production. Now, we're going to get to the point where it's going to be so critically harmful to our industry here, we need to reassess how burdensome these regulations are, especially for CO2 being not a poisonous pollutant per se. I mean, plants need it, and all things in moderation, you might say, but it's important that we have some reality on how these regulations affect. So we've talked about water storage, we've talked about somewhat on energy production, and when I was talking about our water storage, how important hydroelectric electricity is in that it's a CO2-free source. Ms. Malloy talked about geothermal. That is a clean source of energy to produce electricity. And one we haven't got to touch on much, but is also much potential as an issue Western Caucus will be working on, is nuclear energy, another CO2-free source of electricity. If you want to deal with CO2, here you are. Yet these forms of electricity generation are continue to be pushed out or pushed off in the regulatory climate we have here. We have the opportunity to mine the uranium, a lot of it in the western states, build the plants that are going to serve our urban centers. I was talking earlier about how much AI and data centers are going to use so much more electricity. As well, if the electrification of cars and trucks keeps getting pushed, where's that electricity going to come from? It's amazing how you can mandate this in a la-di-da atmosphere of, well, we're just going to have more EVs. But you're not, the folks regulating that and pushing that are not being accountable for where that electricity is going to come from. They think more and more acres of prime farmland covered with solar panels is going to do it, or offshore windmills producing a certain amount of electricity, and they find that they have problems with that, and there might be negative effects on the wildlife and the ocean life there. So it's we indeed need to have the ability to go take a look back at these layers and layers of court decisions since these laws were made with good intention back in the early 70s, whether we're talking Endangered Species Act or the NEPA regulations, the Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, all intended very well, but they've been weaponized by NGOs, environmental organizations, and even those with certain belief systems in government. Heaven knows in my home state of California, they're weaponized to stop some very good projects from happening. When we're talking Endangered Species Act reform, you have species that are basically used to stop water storage, stop highways from being built, stop power plants from being built, even things like levees being repaired in areas that have potential to be flooded. One project in my district took 20 plus years to finally get approved and through for a levee project on an already existing levee. They required that it be set back from the river more, and then a bunch of habitat created out of the farmers' orchards that were adjacent to that on the outside of the old levee, but now inside the new levee. That took over 20 plus years, and it's because of an endangered species as listed by the Fish and Wildlife 20, 25 years ago, maybe longer, that 15 years ago, they recommended, yeah, we can go ahead and delist that now. You can hardly delist anything, it seems, under the way these rules have been misinterpreted. One issue ravaging much of the West, and right now has really taken hold in my district, has been the wolf population that's been introduced. I know the Biden administration has done some of that at the end with over 40 wolves being dumped into Colorado last minute on their way out the door. And wolves in California have really taken hold in the northeast part of the state. Modoc County, Siskiyou County, Lassen County, Eastern Shasta, and other areas to a little bit lesser extent. And they're ravaging those areas. The deer population is being decimated. And when they run out of deer, guess where they're looking next? They're looking at livestock. But here's an example. And I don't mean to be morbid, but people need to see what this really looks like. Here's a wolf toting off a deer right here. It's got a deer head right there. This isn't native to that area. These are Canadian gray wolves. These are great, big, powerful, scary wolves that really aren't indigenous to the farther western states. And it's still listed, and we're making our efforts to delist this wolf from that list. But it's running into problems, running into difficulties because of the environmental movement saying, no, we need to have them everywhere. We need to have mating pairs in every county, I guess, in order to bring satisfaction to their desires on that. But these wolves are plentiful in areas like Minnesota and neighboring states and the central part of Canada. It's not an endangered species. There's plenty of numbers there. If you want to go look at a gray wolf, go travel to that part of the country, because we don't need to have them everywhere in order for somehow to be deemed as recovered. I like to make the giraffe analogy. Now, if you want to go look at a giraffe, you need to go to places in Africa. If you want to look at it in North America, other than the occasional zoo, we don't have them here. So you can't deem them an endangered species in North America because we don't have them here, and somehow have to start a new program to encourage and build giraffe habitat to bring a species in that really doesn't belong in that area. So it doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's really devastating. Over 200 calves have been taken in the Northern California area and part of Oregon as well. Here we see a calf that has been devastated, just completely annihilated and fed upon by a pack of wolves there. And again, I'm not doing this to be morbid but I hope it does shock you. I hope it does shock you, because this is really happening to people's livelihoods that are producing food that Americans want, that others want, and that they can't do so because of a wolf population that's been introduced by government and by the behest of basically urban people that think, oh, wouldn't that be a nice ideal to have these wolves in that area? They don't have to live with the results. So these wolves have become so, let's look at the next one too. They become so brazen in how they act in the area. Here it's taken a sheep. You know, any livestock is on the menu for them, because when they start running out of the local wildlife, they're going to take what they need. And so the ability for people to push back on that, to haze them or to move them away, is very, very limited by how Fish and Wildlife has made the rules. They have very, very few options to keep them not only out of their herds, but away from their doorstep, including this doorstep right here. Yeah, this is a family dog right here. This is what's happening to families that are working in those and living in those rural areas, 4, 5, 6 longer generations, provide food to put it on the table for Americans. And this is what they have to live with. They can't let their pets out in some of these areas anymore. They can't have their kids go down to the bus stop without being guarded in order to do normal things like going to school. The people are afraid to go outside their homes at night in some cases in certain areas, because you can hear the wolves howling, and the wolves don't feel any fear of mankind. They don't feel any deterrent due to the very limited and meager measures that people can take to deter them. They're not allowed to shoot them. They're not even allowed to shoot over them. They're not allowed to be very aggressive with vehicles and such. Indeed, one anecdote I received on visiting some folks in the district is that they have drones they try to fly over and move the wolves away from their herds and away from their area. Finally, the drone just looks up at it and lays down and watches it. And the other measures, they have to fly pieces of flag, of ribbon on their fences and hope that ribbon flapping in the wind it's called fladry, that will scare the wolf away, or they try and string single wires of electric fence. The wolf is pretty smart. They're going to go around that, and when they're running in packs like that, they're very effective at moving the livestock, moving them, herding them to other areas. You hear other stories about them coming in and wiping out an entire flock of sheep on one farm just for the heck of it. A single wolf in one case killed 30 sheep, killed the dog, and basically scared the horse, ran the horse over a cliff area, killing that. That's more or less for sport. And this is what's happening to people. This is what's happening just in my northeast part of my state, but all over the West. The population, the elk population, the deer population being devastated in these areas. But we don't get to talk about that much because it's an ideal under Endangered Species Act that we have to move these animals wherever somebody deems that they need to go. Indeed, when you have populations that will sustain and keep prevent extinction just from what you have in the upper Midwest and Canada. So what is it going to come down to? Do we have to have people themselves be victimized to get a nice idyllic scene like this, people hiking trails? We have the Pacific Crest Trail running through that portion of my district. Now, has there been warnings sent out by the people promoting this wolf population to those that are looking to utilize these trails, Pacific Crest Trail, or climb the different mountains around Northern California? Is there adequate warnings going out to the urban areas when people expect that they're going to be able to do this as they come travel and recreate a little later on this spring and summer and fall? Are they doing that? You have this idyllic scene of a family out there hiking. So do they know possibly there might be wolves lurking in here if they're hungry and they've run out of deer to attack, and the farmers and ranchers have sold their livestock herds or pulled them out or just lost them to wolf attacks, that they're going to get hungry and start coming after anything they can find? Are people going to be on that list? Am I being dramatic? No, this is a reality. This can happen. And so will this scene be allowed anymore in those areas to say, well, it's wolf habitat now, we don't have any people recreating on their lands, on their national lands, on their park lands, the forest lands that are deemed to be multi-use. That use is being narrowed more and more to not doing timber operations and preventing wildfire and having wildlife flourish, but to be a very narrow group being satisfied this. So this is part of the work that we need to get done, and that Western Caucus is going to be focusing on, is endangered species reform, our energy, agriculture. We need to be helping out with making the Farm Bill a reality here soon, because the Farm Bill's had extensions so far. We need to pass a full Farm Bill this year that's good for 5 years, and agriculture being a very important cornerstone of Western Caucus priorities as well, as it is a national priority. So with that, we got our work cut out for us, but we have a great team on our Western Caucus staff, and nearly 100 members of the House that are in this, as well as our colleagues over in the Senate, led by my good friend Senator Lummis from Wyoming. So it's a very positive thing, and I'm looking forward to the work here. I'm honored to be able to chair it. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.